Veteran bought a $200 haunted cabin. His dog's bark uncovered a secret buried for years. The wind howled through the pines like a warning no one wanted to hear. Snow slammed against the cabin walls in thick waves, rattling the old windows as if something outside was trying to claw its way in. Inside, the fire cracked low in the stone hearth, its light flickering across log walls darkened with time. The air smelled of smoke, wet timber, and something older, something that didn't belong. Cal Brennan sat cross-legged near the fire, a chipped mug of black coffee warming his palms. The wool socks on his feet were military issue, thick but worn thin at the heel. His breath misted in the cold room despite the fire, and the silence was just beginning to feel like peace. Then Echo growled. Not a bark, not a whimper. A sound pulled from somewhere deep in the dog's chest, like the low rumble of a fault line before it cracks. Cal's spine went rigid. That growl, it wasn't random. Echo wasn't facing the door. He wasn't even looking towards the windows. The German shepherd stood frozen, staring at the base of the fireplace. Ears flat, tail down, legs braced. Cal's heart stopped for a beat. He had seen that exact stance once before, 7 years ago outside Kandahar, just before Echo halted their entire unit mid-step. A pressure plate bomb had been buried under a patch of dirt that looked just like any other. Echo hadn't barked then either. He'd just frozen. Like now. "What is it, buddy?" Cal whispered, already rising to his feet. Echo didn't blink. His eyes were locked on the fire, or rather, the stones beneath it. Cal moved carefully around the hearth, boots creaking over the old wood floor. The fire popped, a log shifted, and still Echo didn't flinch. That was the part that really got to him. Echo was alert, not panicked, focused, intense. It wasn't fear, it was warning. "You smell something?" No response, just that low, steady growl. Cal leaned in towards the hearth. The stones were old but intact. He touched one near the base, solid, cold, unmoving. Normal. But then he felt it, that pressure shift in the air, the one that made the hairs on his arms stand up. The same one he'd felt in the desert, in places where things had been hidden, buried, or worse, erased. He glanced back at Echo. The dog didn't move, but the tension in his shoulders had increased. This wasn't paranoia. This was real. Cal grabbed his duffel from the corner and pulled out the crowbar he'd picked up at a hardware store that morning. He crouched low beside the fireplace, rested the tip of the crowbar on the seam between two lower stones, and gently tapped. The first stone rang solid. The second as well. But the third, dead. A hollow thud echoed through the floor like a knuckle tapping a coffin. Echo exhaled, a quiet huff that confirmed what Cal already knew. "Of course you were right." He wedged the crowbar under the edge of the stone and pried. Nothing. The mortar held. He repositioned and forced more pressure, jaw clenched. Then came the crack, like bone splitting under a boot. The stone shifted. Cal set the tool aside, wedged his fingers under the lip, and pulled. The stone slab came free. Beneath it, darkness. A hole just wide enough to fit a man's shoulders dropped about 3 feet into the ground. The walls were lined with flat stones, dry despite the snowstorm outside. At the bottom sat a dull green ammo box and 3 small leather-bound notebooks, tied together with what looked like old bootlace. Echo stepped forward, gaze still locked on the hole. He didn't growl now. He just stared. His breath was steady, but the rigid set of his body said enough. He wasn't done watching. Cal crouched beside him and reached down into the dark. The box was heavier than it looked. He pulled it up with both hands, set it gently on the floor, then grabbed the notebooks. The lace disintegrated in his fingers. He opened one. Notes, pages and pages of tight, deliberate handwriting. Lab results, maps, coordinates, and a name. Thomas Avery. Cal's fingers tightened around the journal. He knew that name. A journalist, the one who vanished out here 20 years ago. His truck had been found not far from here, door open, keys still in the ignition. The official story was exposure, but everyone in town had looked the other way. The old man at the auction house had muttered something before handing over the deed. Something like, "Just let the place be." But now Cal was here, and Echo, damn Echo, had found something no one else had dared to look for. He turned the page. One line stood out. They promised the water was safe. Then the deer started foaming at the mouth. Cal didn't speak. He didn't need to. Echo stepped back and sat, never taking his eyes off the fireplace. Not triumphant, not afraid. Just present. Ready. Cal closed the notebook and looked at the box. Whatever was inside, it wasn't meant to be found. "You did good, Echo," he said softly. But Echo didn't wag his tail. He didn't move. He just stared at the open hole, as if waiting for something else to rise from it. Cal felt it too. This wasn't just a haunted cabin. It was a grave. And they had just pulled the lid off. Outside, the snow thickened. The wind screamed like it wanted back in. Inside, the fire snapped again, flames licking at the edge of a truth that hadn't seen light in decades. And the dog, the one who never barked without reason, stayed where he was, watching, guarding. Cal sat back on his heels, snow-damp pants pressing into the floor, heart ticking louder than the fire crackling behind him. The green ammo box on the planks between his knees looked exactly like the ones he'd packed and unpacked 100 times during deployments, only older, scuffed, and sealed tight with corrosion along the hinges. Echo stood beside him, close enough that Cal could feel the heat radiating off. The dog's flank. The shepherd's nose hovered over the open hole beneath the hearth, tail low, body alert but still. Cal didn't open the box right away. He turned to the notebooks. 3 leather-bound journals, the kind old-school field reporters used before apps and cloud storage. The laces crumbled as he untied them. Dust fell like ashes onto his jeans. The leather covers were cracked, stiff, but the pages inside were surprisingly well preserved. No water damage, no mold, just yellowed paper and ink. The handwriting was neat, almost surgical. Strong lines. A man used to discipline. Cal flipped slowly through the first few pages, catching dates, coordinates, notations about chemical levels in groundwater, observations about wildlife, local maps sketched with meticulous care. Some of it was over his head, scientific measurements, field codes. But one name caught his eye, circled in red ink near the top corner of a page. Thomas Avery. Cal froze. He looked again, read the line beneath it. Day 17. If something happens to me, this stays hidden until someone brave enough comes along. Not someone curious, someone angry. Thomas Avery. The name was familiar in a way that raised the hairs on the back of Cal's neck. Not military, not family, something buried deeper. He set the journal down, stood slowly, walked over to his rucksack, and dug out his phone. No signal. Of course not. The nearest cell tower was miles out, and the storm was still throwing fists at the mountainside. He sat down at the table and opened a cached article he'd saved earlier, one that popped up when he'd Googled Morrow Ridge before buying the land. He hadn't thought much of it then. Just small-town rumors. He scrolled until he saw the headline. Local reporter still missing 20 years later. The vanishing of Thomas Avery. Cal read the opening paragraph twice. Avery had been investigating corporate land purchases in the region, specifically a company called Norvastra Energy, which was rumored to be buying rural properties for reasons no one could fully explain. The article mentioned anonymous claims about soil contamination, hush money, threats. The kind of vague, scattered paranoia Cal had seen 100 times in war zones, until it wasn't paranoia anymore. The man had vanished in winter. His truck had been found parked in a ditch 2 miles south of the cabin. Keys still in the ignition. Engine frozen. No sign of struggle. No body, no trail. And just like that, the town moved on. Cal stared at the journal again. Day 17. If the dates were right, Avery had been holed up in this cabin. Maybe even right here, writing these words just feet from where Cal now sat. And nobody had said a damn thing. Echo stepped forward, sniffing the edge of the hole again. His body was more relaxed now, but his focus hadn't shifted. He kept his eyes locked on the stones like they might move again. Cal turned back to the hearth. He slid the ammo box closer, letting the cold metal press against his palm before unhooking the latches. They stuck at first, frozen with time. He forced them open. Inside, neatly packed, were vials. Glass, capped, some labeled with dates, others with coordinates. Several small evidence bags sat underneath, filled with what looked like dirt, dried leaves, even strands of fur. And then, at the bottom, another notebook. Smaller. Sealed in a zip bag that looked government-issued. Cal pulled it out, opened the bag, and flipped through the pages. Lab reports, formal headers. Norvastra internal memo stamped at the top of one, the kind of document that doesn't get left behind by accident. They detailed testing from years ago, water samples pulled from the very creeks that ran through this land. Arsenic, lead, heavy metals at levels well beyond anything the EPA would allow. Several of the pages were marked, "Confidential, do not distribute." Cal looked over at Echo. The dog had turned his head just slightly, like he was waiting for Cal to catch up. Like he already knew. "You knew something was here." Cal muttered. "Didn't you?" Echo walked over, stood beside Cal's chair, and sat. Not fully relaxed, just watching. Guarding. Always. Cal leaned back, staring into the fire, mind racing. This wasn't just about Avery anymore. This wasn't even about the cabin. It was about what had been buried, and what the town had chosen to forget. He thought of the auction again. The empty room. The way nobody even raised an eyebrow when he offered $200 for the property. The way the clerk looked away when she handed him the deed, as if letting go of a secret she was never supposed to touch. He closed the journal, returned it to the box, and sealed it. Echo let out a low whine. "Yeah," Cal said softly. "It's not just haunted, is it? It's hiding something." The dog didn't respond. He didn't have to. Outside, the wind screamed across the ridge, but inside, all Cal could hear was the steady crack of firewood and the breath of the dog who'd just pulled him into something far bigger than either of them had planned for. And somewhere, beneath stone and snow, the ghost of a man who had refused to stay quiet was finally being heard. Snow whispered against the windows, soft but relentless. The storm hadn't let up since yesterday, and the whole mountain felt sealed under ice. Inside the cabin, the fire burned low, throwing a dim orange glow across the floorboards. Cal sat at the table, one of the notebooks open in front of him, a half-empty mug of coffee gone cold beside it. Echo lay on the floor a few feet away, head resting on his paws, eyes half closed, but not asleep. The dog's ears twitched at every sound the cabin made. Cal had spent the last hour going through the first notebook, trying to make sense of the notes. The handwriting was tight and deliberate. The first pages were standard, temperatures, pH levels, coordinates. But deeper in, the tone shifted. The words got darker. There were mentions of strange smells from the creek, dead fish, soil samples testing off the chart. Then he saw it, written in bold across one page. Norvastra Energy. He said the name out loud. Norvastra. Echo's head lifted. Cal frowned. "You remember that sound from the news a few years back, buddy? I think that's them." He flipped to the next page. A map had been hand-drawn, rough but precise. Lines representing the valley's water flow stretched like veins, each labeled with red circles and tiny notes. Well site, barrel cache, north runoff. The company's name appeared again beside one particular area, Morrow Creek. A small note underlined twice read, "Confirmed contamination. Locals warned to stay quiet." Cal felt something tighten in his chest. He turned back a few pages and noticed something else. Every entry after that date ended abruptly. No closure. Just a final scrawl, jagged and shaky. "They found me." Echo gave a low rumble, that same deep vibration from his chest that Cal had come to trust more than most human instincts. The hairs on the back of Cal's neck rose. He looked up. "What is it now?" Echo had gotten to his feet. His body was still, but his nose twitched, tracking the air. He faced the fireplace again, just like the night before. The firelight danced over his fur, the silver sheen catching in the shadows. Cal followed his line of sight. Nothing but flames and stone. Then the flames flickered, hard, like air had shifted inside the chimney. Cal reached for his flashlight, thumbed it on, and aimed it around the cabin. Everything looked the same. The crates, the duffel, the gear. But the feeling had changed. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was alert, watching. Echo stepped forward once, ears high, tail level. He sniffed toward the hearth, then turned his head slightly toward the back wall of the cabin, his eyes fixed on something Cal couldn't see. Cal set the flashlight down. "All right, easy. Talk to me, pal." Echo didn't bark. He walked slowly toward the back of the room, nose grazing the air, then stopped at the far corner where two beams met. Cal followed, crouching beside him. The wood looked old, water-stained. He pressed a palm against it. Cold. Just wood. Then Echo exhaled through his nose sharply, the sound of frustration, and pawed at the baseboard. Cal knelt lower. There, a faint seam, like two boards that didn't quite line up. He pried gently with his fingers. The plank shifted, barely. He grabbed the crowbar again, wedged it under, and levered it up. Dust flew, and a hollow space revealed itself beneath the floor. Inside sat another tin box, smaller than the first. "Well, I'll be damned," Cal muttered. He pulled it out, brushed it off, and popped the latch. Inside were photographs, faded, water-damaged, but still clear enough. Industrial drums half buried near a creek, their sides marked with the Norvastra logo. Another photo showed a man, back turned to the camera, wearing a county uniform. Sheriff's patch visible on the arm. Avery must have taken these himself. Echo whined softly, breaking the silence. Cal glanced down. "You weren't wrong. You never are." He sat back on the floor, the photos spread out in front of him. They told a story without words, a company dumping chemicals into the watershed, a journalist uncovering it, and a town willing to pretend nothing happened. He flipped the last photo over. A single word had been scrawled on the back in fading ink. Proof. The wind howled again, harder this time, rattling the shutters. Cal shoved the pictures and notebook back into the tin and snapped it shut. He'd been in firefights, ambushes, moments when everything in his body screamed that something bad was coming. This was the same feeling. He stood, checked the locks on both doors, then returned to the table. Echo hadn't moved. He sat facing the window now, body taut, ears trained forward. "You smell them?" Cal asked. The shepherd's tail flicked once, slow. Then came the low, deliberate growl. It wasn't random. It was message. Cal stepped closer to the window, parting the curtain just enough to see through the frost. At first, only white. Then a shadow moved. A faint, upright shape halfway down the slope, gone as fast as it appeared. Could have been a tree. Could have been a man. He let the curtain fall back into place. The fire hissed, wood settling. Echo moved back to Cal's side, sitting close enough for his shoulder to touch his leg. Cal rested a hand on the dog's back, feeling the steady rhythm of breath beneath the thick fur. "Whatever this is," Cal whispered, "we're not alone anymore." Echo didn't growl again. He just sat there, unmoving, eyes trained on the dark outside the window, as if daring it to move. Cal looked back at the map on the table. Red circles, barrel sights, contaminated water. It wasn't ghosts haunting this place, it was people. And Echo, his war dog, his silent partner, had been right from the start. By mid-morning, the snow had eased into a light flurry. Grey daylight crept through the cabin windows, casting long shadows across the floor. The fire had burned low, but the warmth inside the room lingered. Cal stood at the counter, scraping the bottom of a dented saucepan for whatever remained of his powdered eggs and canned beans mix. Echo sat near the door, head high, ears twitching every few seconds. He hadn't truly relaxed since last night. Neither had Cal. The evidence was now stashed in 2 different lockboxes, one hidden under the floor, the other sealed and stored in Cal's pack, beneath dry socks and MREs. The map with the red-circled barrel sights had been scanned and saved on a flash drive tucked in his chest pocket. The only thing harder than finding the truth, Cal figured, was protecting it. Echo's body stiffened. Then came the low growl. Short, clipped. Not a warning, a statement. Cal moved to the window and peered through the frost-glazed pane. A tan SUV with county plates was crawling up the snow-packed trail. Big tires, spotlights, government logo fading on the side. A lone figure sat behind the wheel. Echo was standing now, muscles coiled, hackles raised. "Yeah," Cal muttered. "I see him too." The vehicle stopped outside the cabin. The engine shut off. Silence returned, brief and heavy. Then the sound of boots crunching snow. The porch creaked. A firm knock. Not polite. Cal opened the door halfway, hand still resting behind it, near the wall where his sidearm hung in a hidden holster. Echo stood, pressed beside his leg. Mouth shut, body rigid. The man on the porch grinned under a worn sheepskin collar. "Morning," he said, voice friendly, eyes anything but. "Hope I'm not interrupting breakfast." Cal met his gaze. "Depends on what you're here for." The man stuck out a gloved hand. "Sheriff Hank Dillard, just making the rounds after the storm. Heard we had ourselves a new neighbor." Cal didn't shake. "Name's Brennan." The sheriff's eyes drifted down to Echo. The dog didn't move, but his growl deepened, a sound like gravel under pressure. "Nice dog," Dillard said, barely hiding the discomfort. "He's not the petting type." "Noted." Cal stepped out and closed the door behind him, letting Echo remain inside. "What can I help you with, Sheriff?" Dillard folded his arms, taking a moment to scan the ridgeline behind the cabin. "You picked a hell of a place to call home. Morrow Ridge ain't exactly on most folks' retirement lists." "I like quiet." The sheriff smirked. "You and the last guy who lived here. What was his name? Avery? Or is that before your time?" Cal said nothing. Dillard kept smiling. "He was a reporter. Showed up nosing around years back. Made a lot of noise. Got a few people riled up. Then just disappeared. Real mystery. I read something about that. Funny thing," the sheriff continued. "This cabin sat empty for 2 decades. Nobody even wanted to hunt near it. Then you show up, buy it for $200, cash. And right after a nor'easter, no less." Cal shrugged. Seemed like a good deal. "Depends on what you think you're buying." Dillard took a step closer. "Any strange noises at night? Lights in the woods? Folks sometimes say this place is haunted." Inside, Echo barked once, sharp and immediate. Cal didn't flinch. "I sleep fine." The sheriff's gaze sharpened for a fraction of a second. That dog of yours always this high-strung? No, only around certain people. They stood there, snow swirling between them. Dillard's grin thinned. Well, he said finally, just checking in. County likes to keep eyes on its edges, especially when winter sets in. Don't want anyone freezing out here with no one knowing. I'll manage. Sure you will, Dillard said, stepping back off the porch. But if you see anything unusual, you let me know. Don't go chasing shadows. Place like this, you start digging around, you might not like what you find. Cal didn't answer. He waited until the sheriff drove off, tires crunching down the trail, taillights fading into the trees. When he stepped back inside, Echo was still staring at the door, tail stiff, breathing slow. Cal knelt beside him, pressed a hand into the thick fur behind his neck. Yeah, he said quietly. They're watching. Echo turned his head slightly, eyes still trained on the outside world. No bark, no whine, just awareness. Cal stood and walked to the table. He opened the second journal, flipped past the lab notes until he found a paragraph that now felt like a prediction. Sheriff Dillard visited today. Smiled too much, said not to go poking around, told me he used to hunt here as a boy. Said it like a threat. Echo sat down beside the table, watching Cal read. You weren't just smelling rot, Cal said. You knew who it came from. The dog didn't move, but Cal could feel it now, deep in his chest. This wasn't just about Avery, or barrels, or a name in a report. It was about who had let it happen, and who had buried it. He looked down at the map again. Some things weren't haunted, they were just hidden, until a dog refused to let them stay that way. The snow outside had stopped, but the wind hadn't. It howled across the ridge like something alive, clawing at the cabin walls, rattling the shutters. Inside, Cal sat at the table, bent over the notebook. The map spread open beside it. Echo lay near the door, half asleep but alert in the way only trained dogs could be. His ears twitched every few seconds, tracking sounds Cal couldn't hear. The fire had burned down to a soft orange glow. The room was dim and quiet, save for the occasional pop of settling wood. Cal ran a thumb along the edges of the pages, his mind chasing threads that wouldn't tie together. Avery's handwriting was clear, lab results, coordinates, samples. But there was one line he couldn't shake. They found me. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing a hand across his face. They found me, he whispered. Who the hell is they, Avery? Echo stirred. Cal glanced toward him. The shepherd had lifted his head, nose in the air, nostrils flaring. His body stiffened. What is it, Bud? Echo didn't bark. He rose silently, tail low, shoulders tight. His gaze snapped toward the window. Cal followed it, just in time to see a faint shape move past the frosted glass. A blur of black against white, a man-sized shadow. Every muscle in Cal's body locked. He moved quietly, grabbing his pistol from the shelf. The familiar weight steadied him. Echo's lips pulled back. Silent, a growl caught in his throat. He stepped once toward the door, then froze again. The wind masked most of the sound, but beneath it, there was a faint crunch. Boots on snow. Back, Cal whispered. Echo obeyed, retreating to the wall beside the door. Cal killed the lamp, leaving only the firelight. The shadows deepened, stretching long across the floor. Another sound. The click of metal on wood. The back door. Someone was trying to force it. Cal crept to the corner, pistol raised. He could see the latch trembling against pressure from the outside. The air in the room felt heavy. His pulse slowed, steady, trained. Echo was a dark shape now, crouched low, eyes bright in the dim. The latch gave way with a snap. The door swung open. A man in black stepped through, hood up, face hidden behind a ski mask, one hand gripping something small and metallic. Not a gun. A knife, maybe. He didn't have time to react. Echo launched. The impact was violent and sudden. 90 pounds of trained force slammed into the intruder's chest, driving him backward into the wall. The man grunted, weapon clattering to the floor. Echo didn't bite. Not yet. He pinned him with surgical precision, front paws on the man's shoulders, weight crushing, teeth bared inches from his throat. Cal moved in, weapon drawn. "Don't move." The intruder froze. His breath came in ragged bursts, fogging the air between them. Cal kicked the knife out of reach. "Who sent you?" Cal's voice was low, controlled. The man didn't answer. His gloved hand twitched once toward his jacket. Echo's growl deepened into something primal, stopping him cold. Cal pressed the barrel of his pistol against the man's chest. "You want to live? You talk." The man's eyes flicked to the fireplace. "You shouldn't have opened it," he rasped. "Opened what?" "You think you found the truth." The voice was hoarse, muffled through the mask. "You found a grave." "Whose?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he twisted his head slightly, enough for Cal to catch the faint smell of gasoline on his coat, the kind that sticks to everything it touches. Then the intruder's expression changed. No fear, no panic, just a grim kind of certainty. He sucked in a breath and shouted, voice cracking through the cabin like a gunshot. "Burn it! Burn it all!" Before Cal could react, the man jerked sideways, catching Echo off balance long enough to twist free. Cal fired once, the bullet slamming into the wall as the figure bolted through the open door, vanishing into the night. Echo lunged to follow, but Cal snapped a sharp command. "Stay!" The dog froze mid-step, trembling with restrained instinct. Outside, the darkness swallowed the sound of retreating boots, replaced only by the whine of the wind. Cal moved to the doorway, scanned the slope with his flashlight. Nothing. Just snow and trees. He shut the door, bolted it tight. Echo circled the room once, nose pressed to the floor where the man had fallen. Then he lifted his head and gave a low, uncertain whine. The smell lingered, smoke and fuel. Cal crouched beside him, resting a hand on his shoulder. "You were right again," he murmured. "We're in it now." Echo leaned into him, steady but tense, eyes fixed on the door as if expecting the stranger to come back. Cal looked around the room, the evidence boxes, the notebooks, the map. Everything he'd uncovered in the last 48 hours suddenly felt heavier. Someone had sent that man. Someone who knew exactly what he'd found and wanted to erase it. He reached for the box near the table, opened it again, and stared at the samples inside. Soil, vials, reports, all pieces of the same truth. Norvastra energy, contaminated water. Avery's death wasn't a mystery anymore. It was a message. "Burn it all," Cal whispered. "That's what they told him too." Echo let out a single bark, short, sharp, final. Cal nodded slowly. Not a chance. He stood, grabbed his pack, and began sealing the files. Whatever this was, it was bigger than him. But he wasn't about to back down. Outside, the wind roared against the cabin walls, and Echo moved to the window again, standing tall, ears forward. Watching the dark. Not afraid. Just waiting. That was the difference between a watchdog and a warrior. And Echo had never been the former. The sky over Morrow Ridge had taken on a color Cal couldn't name, somewhere between slate and bruised bone. Snow covered everything like a fresh page, quiet, smooth, innocent. But the silence tonight felt false, like the pause before a scream. Inside the cabin, Cal worked fast. The flash drive was loaded. All the scanned documents, maps, soil tests, lab reports, every line from Avery's notebooks, compressed and encrypted. The old military sat transmitter blinked green on the table, signal holding for now. It wasn't fast, but it would be enough. His fingers tapped out coordinates and a single address. Dean Holloway. They hadn't spoken in 2 years, not since Kabul. Dean had always had a nose for the dirty stories, military contracts, oil fields, backdoor politics. Cal trusted him with this because he didn't trust anyone else. Outside, Echo stood sentinel by the window, tail stiff, shoulders square. His breath fogged the cold glass. Cal zipped the satchel shut and looked over. "How we doing?" Echo didn't flinch. His ears twitched, then locked forward. Then came the softest sound, too faint for Cal at first. A footstep, maybe, then another, crunching snow, then silence again. Cal reached for his sidearm. Echo turned his head toward him, not in panic, but in a way that said, "Now." They moved together. Cal tossed the satchel into the wall cavity beneath the floorboard and reset the plank. No time to think. No time to breathe. The first bottle came through the window. It exploded against the opposite wall, shattering glass and fire in all directions. Liquid flames raced across the wooden floor like angry veins. Curtains caught next, then the walls, then the ceiling. Echo barked once, sharp, commanding. Cal spun to the back window, yanked it open. The night air hit him like a wave of cold mercy. Behind him, the fire roared louder. "Go!" he shouted. Echo leapt through the window first, landing hard on the snow. Cal followed, boots hitting the frozen ground just as a second Molotov arced through the front window. The cabin behind them lit up like dry brush. They ran. But the night was not empty. 2 shadows moved at the cabin's flanks, figures in black, one with a bottle raised, the other fumbling with a lighter. Cal fired twice. One man dropped. The other bolted into the trees, slipping over snow-covered roots. Flames licked higher behind them. The heat pushed at their backs even from a distance. Echo didn't chase. He stuck to Cal's side, moving fast but uneven. Then Cal saw it, a dark patch along Echo's flank. Fur scorched, skin red and cracked, burned. Cal dropped to one knee. "Let me see, buddy." Echo stood still, chest heaving, letting Cal run his hands gently along his side. No whimper, no flinch. But his breathing hitched just once. "Damn it," Cal whispered. He pulled out the emergency salve from his pack, slapped it on without ceremony. The smell of singed fur mixed with antiseptic. Echo leaned into his palm, only slightly. But it was enough. They moved again, deeper into the trees. Snow fell again now, slow and quiet, trying to erase the fire's glow behind them. Cal didn't look back, but Echo did. The dog turned once, eyes trained on the burning cabin, ears high. He didn't blink until Cal spoke. "We'll rebuild," Cal said. "Not just the cabin, everything." They hiked 2 miles in silence until they reached the creek bend, one of Avery's marker points. Under a thick overhang of stone, they dropped into a hollowed-out space Cal had cleared days ago. It was cold and cramped, but dry. Cal laid the blanket down, helped Echo lie flat. The shepherd's body shook once as the pain caught up, but he never cried out. "You saved me again," Cal murmured. "Again." Echo blinked slowly, then rested his head on Cal's boot. "Guarding, even now." Inside the pack, the satellite transmitter gave one last green blink. Message sent. Dean would know what to do. Back at the ridge, flames still tore through the remains of Avery's secrets, at least the paper ones. But the real fire, the one they tried to snuff out, was still alive. And it had teeth. The cold had stopped being sharp. It had settled into Cal's bones now, a dull, constant ache as he crouched behind the deadfall, scanning the clearing ahead. Snow dusted the ground, no deeper than a few inches, but enough to muffle sound. Echo crouched beside him, close, motionless, his breath slow but visible in the frigid air. The map in Cal's hand, the one Avery had drawn by flashlight 2 decades ago, showed a circle here. the note scribbled beneath it. Site Delta, confirmed burial, high concentration, witnessed shipment. For the past 2 days, Cal and Echo had tracked those circles. Red ink turned real locations hidden in the folds of Montana's wilderness. Each one had turned up nothing. Until now. Echo's ears twitched. He stood, slow and deliberate. His nose tilted toward the breeze, then dipped back to the snow. He stepped forward once, twice, then stopped. His paw pressed against the ground. He looked back at Cal. Right here. Cal rose, shouldering the small E-tool from his pack. He joined Echo at the edge of a twisted tree stump and began to dig. The first few inches were frozen, resistant. Then it turned looser. Loamy, disturbed. Echo moved in beside him and began to scrape at the earth with his forepaws, methodical. He wasn't frantic. He never was when it mattered, each stroke deliberate, pressing deeper into the cold soil. Then came the sound Cal hadn't realized he was waiting for, a dull thunk. Metal. Echo froze, nose inches from a rusted edge. Cal pulled his gloves tighter and knelt. He cleared more dirt away, revealing the curved top of a barrel. The paint was faded, almost eaten away, but the stamp was still there, barely legible. Norvastra Industrial. He sat back on his heels, breath caught somewhere between disbelief and confirmation. You were right, he whispered. Echo didn't react. He had turned slightly to his right now, still sniffing, still working. Cal rose to grab the marker flags from his pack. By the time he returned, Echo had uncovered more ground. This time, something different. Not metal. Not round. A scrap of cloth. Cal stopped cold. He crouched slowly, heart thudding in his throat. The cloth was wrapped around something rigid, tangled in roots. He reached forward, brushing soil back with the care of someone touching bone, and then realized he was. A femur. Human. Echo let out a soft breath and backed away, not from fear, but reverence. Cal stared at the exposed bone, the cloth still clinging to it. Military canvas. Tattered. Bits of what looked like boot leather a few inches away. And near the hand, if it was still a hand, something small and square. He reached for it. An old ID badge, cracked and discolored, but the nameplate had survived. Barely. Avery T. Cal sat down hard. His eyes traced the evidence in front of him. A poisoned earth, a buried barrel, and a man who had died trying to uncover the truth. He looked over at Echo. The dog had moved a few feet away, sitting quietly now, eyes watching the tree line. Always guarding. We're standing in his grave, Cal said. Avery never left this place, and nobody had ever planned for him to be found. Snow began to fall again, soft flakes catching in Cal's hair and on Echo's back. The clearing grew quieter, like even nature was holding its breath. Cal took out his satellite phone. The signal bars blinked weak, but present. He turned on the encrypted app, attached the location pin, and began composing the message. Found it. Burial confirmed. Avery, too. Barrel intact, moving to extraction point. Uploading now. He hit send. It would go to Dean, and from Dean to the people who could make this public, who could crack open what Norvastra had sealed with soil, silence, and a corpse. Cal glanced back toward the barrel, still half submerged in the frozen ground. Then toward the shallow pit, the ragged remains of a man whose voice had almost been erased. Not anymore. Echo moved beside him, sitting close enough for their shoulders to touch. His breathing had slowed, steady again, but his eyes hadn't left the tree line. Cal whispered, "You knew where to dig." The dog didn't blink. They sat in that clearing a while longer, letting the snow cover just enough to keep the cold honest, but not enough to bury the truth. Then Cal stood, packed the coordinates, the photo evidence, the ID badge. He patted Echo's side gently. "Let's bring him home." And together they turned from the grave, back toward the ridge, back toward the storm. The last secret in the valley was no longer buried, and the only reason it would be heard was because one dog refused to stop watching. The hearing room inside the federal courthouse wasn't built for moments like this. It was sterile, fluorescent, dressed in layers of official silence and bureaucracy. But even in all its order and marble, the air felt tense, like a fuse had already been lit. Cal stood near the back, wearing the only suit he owned. The collar still scratched. His shoulder ached from an old injury and from newer nights spent sleeping on frozen ground. But his posture was steady. His eyes were clear. Echo sat beside him, freshly brushed, but still bearing the small scar on his flank from the fire. The burn had healed, but the fur hadn't fully come back. It made him look tougher, in a way, like a soldier with a visible medal no one could remove. At the front of the room, Dean Holloway moved through a line of reporters with the ease of a man used to wading into trouble. His beard had gone grayer since the war, but his voice still had that edge of challenge. He handed off a folder of printed evidence to the court clerk, then nodded once to Cal without saying a word. FBI agents lined the rear walls. Their presence wasn't for show. What Cal and Dean had uncovered had rippled into every agency with a badge or a subpoena. Norvastra's inner circle was collapsing under the weight of emails, falsified safety reports, and the buried body of Thomas Avery. At the center table sat a man in a charcoal suit and polished boots. Kenneth Dorset, former CEO of Norvastra Energy, current architect of silence. His tie was perfect, his expression unreadable. Not arrogance, just control. Like he still believed this was all noise, and it would fade. The chairwoman called the hearing to order. Dean took the stand first, voice crisp, methodical. He walked the committee through the timeline, the barrels, the ghost town silence, the failed warnings, the maps, the evidence from the satellite transmission. Then Cal stepped up. The room shifted. Reporters leaned in. Cameras clicked like insects. He spoke simply. About the auction, the cabin, the dog who wouldn't stop growling at Stone, about finding Avery, about the grave, about the man who shouted, "Burn it all," before vanishing into the trees. "I didn't go looking for this," Cal said, "but once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it." He looked toward Echo, who sat obediently just behind the rail, wearing the blue vest the court had allowed him to wear in place of a muzzle or crate. Service dog protocol had been bent for this. No one protested. Echo was trained to find danger, Cal continued, but not just bombs, not just scent. He finds what shouldn't be ignored. Then came the moment they'd all been waiting for. Dorset stood. His attorney prompted him with a question about the company's environmental practices. Dorset's voice was smooth, polished, dismissive. "There is no verified evidence that Norvastra Energy knowingly contaminated any public land or water source." Cal didn't move. Echo did. The German shepherd stood up, slowly, deliberately. He stepped once toward the railing. No bark, just the rise of his body, the stiff angle of his tail, and the sound that followed. A deep, unbroken growl that rolled through the room like thunder waiting for lightning. Every head turned. Dorset hesitated mid-sentence. The microphone crackled with silence. Echo's gaze was locked. Not aggressive, just honest, unflinching. As if he knew, at a level no human court could reach, what kind of man stood behind that suit and silence. No one spoke. One of the agents at the back of the room adjusted his stance. The judge leaned forward, and Dorset, for the first time, blinked. The growl tapered off slowly, but Echo didn't sit. He held the line. Cal rested a hand on his side, a quiet signal. Echo obeyed. He returned to a seated position, still alert, still facing forward. Later, after the room emptied and the press swarmed the exits, Dean leaned in beside Cal and said, "I've covered war zones. I've seen interrogations. Nothing. And I mean nothing. Hits harder than that dog's growl." Cal nodded. "He doesn't lie." Dean looked down at Echo, then back at the sealed evidence case now marked for federal review. "They won't be able to bury this again." "No," Cal said, "because he wouldn't let me." Across the room, the clerk filed away the last of the day's documents. The door clicked shut behind the final camera crew. Echo rose one last time, walked to the center of the aisle, and turned back, guarding the room like it still mattered. And in that silence, not a single person questioned who had told the truth. Because sometimes justice doesn't wear a badge. Sometimes it walks on 4 legs and growls when it counts. The letter came registered mail, wrapped in official insignias and bureaucratic pride. Inside, there was a formal invitation, a ceremony in D.C., full honors, media coverage, even a small cash award, in recognition of extraordinary civilian contribution to national security and environmental protection. Cal didn't even finish reading it. He folded the paper once, twice, and tucked it under the leg of the wobbly kitchen table in his temporary trailer, like it was just another scrap of paper trying too hard to be something it wasn't. The only thing he asked for, the only thing that mattered, was the land. The charred cabin lot, the surrounding woods, the trail Echo had worn down to a soft dirt groove with months of patrol. The place where it all started, and where it had nearly ended. No one fought him on it. Not after the headlines. Novastra dismantled in wake of federal indictments, missing scientist found in shallow grave. Cover-up confirmed K9 hero sparks, national environmental reform. The sheriff was led out in cuffs 2 days after the hearing. 2 other local deputies resigned. The town council quietly deleted 6 meeting records. Novastra's board was dissolved, and the company's assets were seized in a sweeping federal injunction. Dean Holloway gave one last interview before disappearing into a quiet job with a Veterans Justice Initiative. But Cal stayed. He and Echo moved back up the mountain the week after the snow melted. The land was cleared, but the cabin was still just blackened timber and melted nails. The trees around the site had bowed away from the fire, like even they didn't want to get involved. It took 3 months to rebuild. Cal worked with his hands, not because it was cheaper, but because it was necessary. He wanted the place to rise slow, to be stitched back together board by board with something more honest than insurance money. Echo was always nearby. He didn't bark much anymore. He didn't have to. They built the porch first, wide enough for a dog to sprawl across and still have sun on his back in the morning. Then came the roof, then the windows, then a small chimney that breathed its first wood smoke into the clean air of late May. A reporter found Cal one morning while he was hauling cedar beams. The woman was young, polite, and clearly not ready for the answer she got when she asked, "How does it feel to be a hero?" Cal looked at her, then at Echo. The dog had a piece of rope in his mouth, dragging it playfully in circles near the old fire pit. "I didn't do it for recognition." Cal said, "I did it because no one else did. And he nodded toward Echo. He did it because he still believed people were worth saving." "Would you consider sharing your story with other outlets?" she asked. "You could raise awareness, get funding for veteran dog programs." Cal paused. It wasn't a bad idea, but it wasn't why he came back. "Tell people to listen to their dogs," he said finally. "That's enough." She left after an awkward handshake and a single photo. The world outside spun, on with its court proceedings and nightly news specials. Congress passed a bill. Norvastra's board issued a formal apology nobody believed. There was talk of a documentary. But up in the hills, none of that reached the porch. Cal nailed the last board into place just as summer broke open. The nights were warmer now. The frogs returned. And for the first time in months, Echo fell asleep on the porch without jerking awake at every snapping twig. He didn't whine in his sleep. He didn't pace. He just curled near the door, let out a soft breath, and rested his head on his front paws like he finally believed he didn't have to stand guard anymore. Cal sat beside him, sipping coffee from a chipped mug. "You earned this," he said quietly. Echo's ear twitched. The rebuilt cabin didn't have any plaques, no photos, no flags, just the sound of pine trees in the wind and the quiet rhythm of two beings who'd survived each other's silence and found something better on the other side. No trophies, no medals, just peace. And sometimes peace was enough. The cabin was quieter now. No more reporters, no more investigators, no more phone calls asking for comment or exclusive interviews. Just wind pushing through the tall pines and the soft creak of wood settling into place. And Echo, still watching, still guarding. Cal had kept to himself since rebuilding the cabin. Aside from the occasional supply run into town, he didn't go far. The world had returned to its noise, its headlines, its habit of forgetting. But up here, some things stayed remembered. Late one afternoon, as yellow light poured through the treetops and scattered across the porch, a knock sounded at the gate. A boy stood there. 16, maybe 17. Skinny. Wire-rimmed glasses. Holding a notebook and a cheap digital recorder in his hands, both shaking a little. "Mr. Rafferty?" Cal leaned against the porch post, nodding once. I'm Logan. I'm writing a school essay about people who made a difference. Real difference. And my teacher told me about you and Echo." Cal didn't answer. The boy pressed on, nervously. "She said, if you want to understand courage without medals, find the man with the rebuilt cabin and the dog who doesn't bark for no reason." Echo, now greying around the muzzle, stood from his place by the door and slowly made his way to the gate. He didn't growl. He didn't wag. He just looked at the boy, long and measured, like he was weighing something invisible. Logan swallowed. "I was wondering," he said, voice cracking slightly. "If I could ask a few questions, just to understand why you stayed, why you fought back when no one else did." Cal stepped off the porch. He walked past the boy, past the questions, and pointed to the old wooden gate he had rebuilt with his own hands. Hanging from it was a weather-worn plank, carved simply but deeply. He didn't bark for food. He barked for the truth. The boy stared at the words, lips parting. He didn't write anything down. He just stood there, like something clicked into place. Echo returned to his spot on the porch, lying down slowly with a groan of old bones and worn-out duty. His eyes tracked the trees, the wind, and then, satisfied, he closed them. Logan turned to Cal. "Did he ever stop guarding?" Cal's eyes stayed on Echo. "He only rests when he knows I don't need protecting." Silence settled between them, full and warm. The boy nodded, like he understood something he couldn't yet explain. "I think that's all I need," he said quietly. "Thank you. For everything." Cal didn't reply. As Logan walked back down the dirt path, the wind picked up, tossing leaves across the clearing. Echo lifted his head once, as if to check, then laid it back down with a soft huff. The truth had been spoken. No plaques, no trophies, just a gate with a carved reminder and a dog who still guarded not with sound, but with presence. Maybe that was the point. Maybe justice didn't always roar. Sometimes it sat quietly on a porch, watching, remembering. And sometimes that was enough. Now let me ask you, what's your story with a loyal pet? If Echo's journey stirred something in you, don't forget to support our channel. We tell stories that matter, about the silent heroes on four legs and the people who stand with them. Like, share, subscribe, and let the world know truth still has a heartbeat, and sometimes it has four paws.